Well, nothing wrong with that. Manual preparation for DSEK is a fantastic technique, and it is where all of us started. And the outcomes of DSEK surgery using tissues that are prepped manually is still quite fantastic. There are some advantages of automated donor preparation, and obviously the convenience is one of them. But I think what we're going to focus on today is about the tools that you will use for graft preparation using manual methods. For our American colleagues, and please bear with us because this is probably a part that you don't invest a lot of time in. You'll get pre-cut tissues from the eye bank. But I think this is very important for a lot of us where accessibility to pre-cut tissues is not as easy. So what we're going to be talking about today is mainly about the tools that we use in making pre-cut tissues for DSEK surgery manually, what you need to do to take care of your tools, how you use them appropriately, and then finally the sequence of steps in using these tools. What we will not cover today is we are not going to be covering the actual surgical technique and also the comparison between the manual and automated dissection. We're not going to be looking at the surgical perspective of using what you prepare, nor the surgical challenges, nor the outcomes. And this is probably something that we will cover when we speak about DSEK and donor preparation in the next few classes. So there are three primary tools that you would like to use for donor preparation using the manual method for DSEK. One is you'll need an artificial anterior chamber. The second is you'll need a garden knife. And then you'll need a dissector. So these three instruments, in addition to all the little bells and whistles that you have along with you, are probably what you need before you start to do manual dissection in DSEK surgery. Now let's look at each of these one by one. First, the artificial anterior chamber. This is probably the heart of donor preparation for DSEK tissue using whatever tools you would like to. Two major types available in the market right now: the acrylic bar plastic variety that you see on the left side, along with silicone tubings, and the metal variety is the one that you see on the right side. Now, interestingly, the artificial anterior chamber is something that is not new. This was originally conceptualized more than 3 decades ago, where it was initially used to pre-cut corneal tissue from the epithelial side for penetrating keratoplasty. And this was the first artificial anterior chamber that was actually being used, and you'll see on the right side, cornea being trephinated after being implanted, inserted into the artificial anterior chamber. So going back to the ones that we have available today, the design has certainly changed quite a bit from the original kinds of artificial anterior chambers that were available. And this probably is amongst the most versatile tools that a corneal surgeon should have, not only from the point of view of preparing donor tissues, but also from the perspective of practicing new surgeries as well, since a lot of new surgeries can be practiced just using this artificial chamber to simulate how the eye actually looks. Now, if you look at the metal chambers, again, there are three major designs. There's several variants to the designs as well. The one that you will see on the left side is from Moria. This actually is a part of the ALTK system, and this is also the one that is going to be used for the preparation of automated pre-cut tissues. But you can use this as well to do manual dissection of your DSEK grafts. Then you have the second kind of design, which is mainly from Indo-German, where the mounting is the same, but the way in which you fix your tissue is a little different. And the third design is the metallic one from several instrument manufacturers that are available right now. I probably haven't gotten the full list down there, but this seems to be the most popular metal design, where you have a round screw ring around the base of the artificial anterior chamber. The issue with using a metal artificial anterior chamber for graft preparation, one is potentially it's more expensive. It's a little more expensive, but the fact that the advantage is it can be reused because you can sterilize it. The one disadvantage that I thought was from the artificial anterior chamber was the reflection of the light from the chamber, though some of the ones that are tooled, like the Moria one, reduce the reflection significantly. And additionally, the amount of exposure of your tissue is a little lesser in the metal chambers as you compare them with the plastic chambers. Additionally, because the plastic chambers can get compressed a little, whereas the metal ones don't get compressed as much, you will see that leaks are more common when you mount your tissue with a small sterile limb using a metal chamber as compared to a plastic chamber. And that's why for donor prep, at least, I think the plastic artificial anterior chambers, the acrylic ones, probably are more suitable and more desirable to use. Primarily three that at least I've used and have experience with. The ones that are widely available in the market, Moria uses a metal ring as well as additional a piece of equipment to help with the automated preparation of tissue. But the two most commonly used ones in the market are the Catina Instruments Baron Design Artificial Anterior Chamber, and the one from Network Medicals, also called by the brand name Coronet. So I'll take you through a very brief video. This is from the manufacturer's website of what components are part of these artificial anterior chambers. This is the first one from Catina. You'll see that there are three components. The first one is the fixation ring, and then you have the tissue holder, and then you have the base of the artificial anterior chamber. All of these actually come together after you put your tissue in place, and then you actually fixate your tissue in place. And we'll actually see how this is done in real time. If you increase the pressure in the artificial anterior chamber, the tissue actually will become a little more ectatic. If you reduce the pressure, the tissue actually goes back. The second variant is the Coronet one. And again, this is a video downloaded from the website of the retailer, where you have the same basic components. You have the base, then you have the compression ring or the ring that is used to tighten. You have a lure lock that will allow you to connect. This additionally has a reservoir for excess fluid that drains out. And you'll see you have two alignment rings, one small and one large, depending on the size of the sterile rim that you have. So the assembly is pretty much the same as you saw for the Catina chamber. And we'll actually see a little bit more of this when we actually look at the actual tissue dissection. One of the important things about using an artificial anterior chamber is also taking care of it. You will know that the plastic or the acrylic ones are not suitable for autoclaving. Ideal to have them ETO'd. But what is also important to see is the one on the left side is a new one. The one on the right side is a used one. And you'll see a little residue of viscoelastic along the margins of the used artificial anterior chamber because we tend to use it more than one time. In fact, when we started DSEK tissue dissection way back in 2007, probably the two artificial anterior chambers that we used for more than 200 cases after ETO sterilization. So you can certainly use these durable pieces of equipment more than once, especially in a country like India where we have limited resources. The other important thing about using these artificial anterior chambers is they will last you a very long time if you clean them well. If you look at the left side, there is a little bit of residue of viscoelastic, and one of the holes actually is blocked. And this is what kills this artificial anterior chamber, and you can't use it if you use viscoelastic and you don't clean it well enough. The second thing that also tends to get damaged, if you look at the bottom, is the silicone tubing and the connectors where you start to have leaks if you reuse the artificial anterior chamber, and especially if you autoclave it. You can autoclave this, but the life goes down quite significantly and the silicone tubes become rigid and they break after some time. The second components of the tool are the guarded knife. Now, the guarded knife, again, you can use a steel one like you see on the left side, or you can use a diamond one depending on what you have access to. Both of them have their advantages and disadvantages to use. Now, what should be the depth of your initial incision? As you will see in the video later, all the epithelium is taken off. So for people who are beginning, would recommend to go slightly shallower, about 300 microns in the periphery, so that when you approach the center, you still are significantly far off from the Descemet's membrane and your risk of perforation is lesser. Because if you use a pre-cut of about 500 microns, then you're going to be going very close to your Descemet's membrane and endothelium, and the risk of your perforation is going to be higher. As you gain more experience, you can go deeper and deeper, and you can also do a second layer of dissection if you're not happy with the thickness of the cap that you've removed in the first layer of dissection. The third component of the instruments is the lamellar dissectors. Again, several varieties available here from several manufacturers, both Appaswamy, Tricon, Storrs, Katina, Dork, and also the Basak dissectors from Georgia. Each of these has their own advantages and disadvantages, but the design primarily is of two varieties. You have a broad design and you have a narrow design. Personally, I like the narrower design because you encounter lesser resistance as this instrument moves forward in the cornea. And you also have the curvature, which is important. You usually have one dissector that is less curved and a second one that is more curved to access the part of the cornea beyond the apex. So let's look at a quick external video of manual dissection of a donor tissue, how you mount your tissue and how you do the dissection. So this is the base of the Katina artificial anterior chamber. You see it has a few serrations to hold the tissue properly. And it also has two access silicone tubes that you can lock and close so that you can prevent egress of fluid or whatever else you want to put inside those tubes. Some surgeons like to put corneal media inside those tubes. Some surgeons like to put just saline so that your view is still pretty clear. This is the fixation ring where you actually use and two holes for the pivots. And this is the tighten ring that you put after you put the cornea in place. This is just assembly of the artificial anterior chamber like you saw right in the beginning in the video, is to make sure that you assemble it correctly and ensure that it is tight. Without a cornea, it is usually a little looser, but once you put a cornea, it becomes much tighter. I like to put in saline in one of my, or BSS in one of my silicone tubes and air in the other. You will see why shortly. And I usually start by putting a little viscoelastic on the surface of the artificial anterior chamber before I put my cornea, just as an added insurance so that the endothelium does not touch the bottom of the artificial anterior chamber. So once you have your cornea placed there, then you need to put in your instrument, your cornea fixation plate, which is what will go in, and spending some time ensuring that the centration is adequate. So this is your second part of your artificial anterior chamber that you will assemble. You need to put the fixation plate or fixation ring in place. And also before you tighten it, ensure your centration is good enough so there are no leaks in the periphery from any areas of short corneostereal rims. And then you put your fixation ring or your tightening ring, and then you tighten it clockwise. And once you do that, you ensure that your silicone tube, the leer lock is open, and you tighten the anterior chamber so that your graft or your cornea actually is quite taut. This is important for your initial incision and dissection, but then this changes later on. Initially, I like to take off all the epithelium from the graft, both from the point of view of visibility and also from the point of view of having a uniform surface in all cases so that I'm sure about the depth at which I'm cutting. In this video, I'm going to be demonstrating the use of a 300 micron steel blade instead of a diamond blade. This is the 300 micron steel blade, and you'll get this as a blade that you can use as a pre-cut. I usually make about 2 clock hours of incision at the limbus to ensure that it is even. Make several cuts back and forth. With a diamond knife, you don't need to do that. But with a steel knife, you need to do that to ensure you have an even cut that is across the at least 2 clock hours. Once I finish that, then I take my first dissector. Also note that I tend to lift the artificial anterior chamber up with my left hand so that the access to the bottom of that incision is easier. And then I go straight forward. As you can see here, I'm going straight forward with my dissector. This is the Meles dissector from Dork. Personally, my choice, but obviously you can use whatever you have access to or whatever you like. The reason I like this is because this actually is very quick in dissecting tissue, and also because it is so narrow. The ability for you to push it through the corneal stroma is easier. You don't have to spend a lot of resistance trying to get it in. And you see, this is all in real time, hasn't been sped up. And that is the first dissection that is done. After this, I try to reduce the pressure slightly and then use my second dissector, which is a little longer, a little more curved. And for this, what I do is I ensure that I also tilt up the artificial anterior chamber slightly upwards. And then you see the access is quite easy. And once you reach the area where the dissection is stopped with the previous dissector, you again continue straight forward till you reach the limbus. And then you try to dissect the rest of the corneal stroma that has been left undissected. And you will see here that the cornea is not as taut because we've reduced the pressure inside the artificial anterior chamber. Just go in and check just to make sure that all the dissection is complete. That's the end of the dissection in real time, and you'll see it's pretty quick. And then you disassemble the artificial anterior chamber, and here is where you will open up the layer lock of the air. And then as I try to lift off the guard ring, I keep injecting air just to make sure that the tissue does not collapse and the endothelium does not touch the back of the artificial anterior chamber. You see it's trying to do that. So as you continue to inject air, it will prevent that from happening. And once you've done that, you can just pick your tissue from the back of your artificial anterior chamber and put it back in your storage media before you dissect it for your DSEK surgery. So that's all I have about the tools for your manual dissection of DSEK tissue, and be happy to answer any questions if you have them.